Welcome back to the Capes and Tights podcast right here on capesandtights.com. I'm your host, Justin Soderberg. Once again, we're back with another creator. This time we have Matt Carr, who is the writer of Mise En Place, a CEX one-shot that comes out April 26th, again at CEX Publishing. Written by Matt Carr, art by Lane Lloyd, letters by Sean Reinhart. Great book, amazing story, one-shot, easy to pick up and purchase and read the 22 pages at your local comic book shop. Let them know you want it. It is on FOC here pretty soon, so check out that as well. So Matt, along with his wife Jenna, founded and operated Little Red Fox, a beloved neighborhood cafe and bakery, and Sugar Fox, a next door ice cream and cake shop in Washington, D.C. for nearly 10 years, but decided to close up shop and sell the building and is now opted to write a comic book. So check that out. It's Mise En Place over at CEX Publishing. So we talked that, amongst other things, here on the Capes and Tights podcast. But before you listen, check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, as well as visit Spotify and Apple Podcasts to subscribe, rate, review, 5 stars, please. This time around, it's Matt Carr, writer of Mise En Place over at CEX Publishing. Enjoy, everyone. Welcome, Matt. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks so much for having me on.
Absolutely. And we're here to talk about comic books and stuff like that, but we're also here to just chat and hang out. How has your 2023 been going?
Yeah, off to a pretty interesting start. I ran a cafe in DC for the past 10 years that we just kind of closed and sold the space, and yeah, so I've been actually have a lot of free time to work on comics and read comics before I start my next day job.
Hey, you know what? Things happen for a reason, and hoping that things move in the right direction for you. But like I said, talking about comics for sure is the fact that the benefit of us you moving on from the restaurants, we get this new comic book. And I'm gonna say I speak English, so this is a little harder because this is a French words, right? These are French words. Is it Mise En Place?
Yeah, mise en place. It's it's something they teach in kitchens, especially like high end French kitchens. Just Julia Child talks about in her cooking shows. It's just like doing all your prep work.
Mm-hmm. That's what I think I had it in here as like getting ready or like before you cook or something like that, right?
That's like chopping your vegetables, having all your ingredients ready to go. So when you're ready to start firing something up, you've got everything in its place.
And obviously that means that there's a reasoning. So you ran restaurants and stuff like that. So then you obviously it makes sense to put that into your comic book because it's what you know, right? What you know, correct? I mean,
yeah, right. Oh, that's what I was taught in starting in 6th grade, I think.
But before we get into that, really, I want to know, let's find out a little bit about you, Matt. So tell us your comic book origin story in a sense. What's your journey? How did you get from potentially reading or collecting comics to the fact that now you're writing a comic book?
Sure. Yeah. I grew up in the 90s reading lots of that all the great X-Men stuff. Was a big collector back then. Probably took a long pause in high school, college. But then I lived in Portland, Oregon for a while and kind of started reading more then. I think I stumbled upon some graphic novels like Blankets by Craig Thompson. My wife gifted me a Sandman one year. So, started kind of learning that there was more than just superhero stuff. But then at the same time, I also started reading some really great superhero stuff like Invincible by Robert Kirkman. And I just kind of started going full steam ahead as an adult, getting back into it. In terms of writing and creating comics, I made comics when I was a kid, but as an adult, actually the start of the pandemic, I started taking classes at Comic Experience, just an online comic book school. And that was just a total blast. I just did it just to, had some spare time. But it's a really great community in school. Took classes on writing, basic intro to comic book art. And they eventually started their own publishing line, which is what my first comic is coming out on.
And that's awesome.
So
through CEX
Go
or
ahead.
Comics Experience Publishing. Is that
Yes, yes.
and we a good friend of ours here at the podcast and Capes and Tights is Joseph Schmalke, whose book is also coming out right around the same time
Yeah.
as yours. Is also releasing his book over at CEX. It seems like they're gaining some traction and pulling out some pretty good quality books here in the recent times, and I'm glad that I didn't hear about them really honestly until Joe messaged me. I just had
Sure.
never, I don't know why, but like Joe messaged me and he's like, hey, don't tell anybody yet. But I decided to release 7 Years in Darkness with CEX and so on and so forth. And that's when I started to I was like, who? And I had to look it up, but it's my fault for not actually knowing. But I was happy to read it, and then that makes me actually look at Previews World when I get the actual book, and I'm like looking through what else they have publishing coming out, and that's where I stumbled upon your book, and I'm glad I was able to do that because I got the chance to read it recently, and it's a fun book. Is there a reason why you went with a one shot, or is this something that CEX wanted, or something that you wanted, or is it just the way that it fit, the story fit?
Yeah, well, I've had a couple shorts published, but
Mhm.
as like a first time full issue, a one shot is well, one for a publisher, I guess it's like a lot less of a risk. It's easier to sell. You don't have to pay for all the extra issues in case it doesn't do well. And as a very new creator, it's definitely easier to tackle a single story as when you're starting out.
But with a one shot like this too, with this book, you have the ability to continue it if you wanted to, right? I mean, this story isn't really ending to a point where it's like
Yeah,
this is a finite ending. It's kind of open ended in a sense.
yeah. You want to kind of like tell your story, but yeah, I did leave it a little open ended in case there was ever an opportunity to continue it. It's definitely tough, though. Keeping everything in like those 22 pages. Lots of editing has to happen to make that work. You want to
And that
like show off what you got and make the story interesting, but you also got to like keep it tight.
and that's one of those things. Some people can put too much into an issue or not enough. If you have an ongoing series or a mini series, maybe the first issue doesn't have enough because you're setting the groundwork for everything. And if you have an
Yeah.
ongoing, you might put too much in it in a one shot because you're trying to get it all into 22 pages. I feel like what you were able to accomplish with this is the availability to actually like make it worth reading, but not too much. And the art is amazing too. Is it Lane Lloyd? How did you get connected with
Yes.
Lane?
Yeah. Through CEX Comics,
Okay.
Paul Allor, he was one of my teachers. He's also a really great writer. He wrote Hollow Heart for Vault. Does a bunch of like Power Ranger, Ninja Turtle stuff for IDW. Um, yeah, he helped project manage it, and yeah, he found Lane and connected me with them. They have just an incredibly kind of unique, expressive style that
Mm-hmm.
it made what could be kind of like a serious story. Kind of, it made like the comedy and like pulpiness really shine. I think so. It was a great compliment
It,
to the story.
yeah, and I think there's just you don't see many comic books that I'm reading in more recent times of that look like that on the inside, which is great. I think it's like the simple, almost flat, cartoony, pulpy, like you mentioned, look that makes it so much that stood out to me. Like it made me want to like stare at the pages a little bit longer, which is pretty good. Whereas some books nowadays, and I think in the big two, it's mainly with Marvel and DC, they just all look the same. And so when you're looking through the thing,
Yeah,
the artwork's amazing. No, nothing against the artwork, but sometimes you look through it, you're like, okay, I get what's going on here, and you move on to the next page. This just made me want to look at each page differently, which is pretty cool. And that's pretty cool to have complementing your writing.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, when everyone's doing like the hyper realistic style, it is a bit harder to stand out, even though the talent level to get there is insane. But yeah, it does harder to stick out with your own style points.
And on top of that, you have your cover. Is it Nicole? I don't know how to say her last name. Is it Goo?
I've only emailed with her, but Nicole Goo is how I.
Let's
I
say
have
sometimes you can
confirmed
just go on
that.
Google and just type in like how do you pronounce this, and sometimes they come up and sometimes they don't. And so Nicole is an excellent cover artist on issue on the cover A. It's a very 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 captivating. I mean, if I were just to judge a book by its cover and see this on the shelf at my LCS, I would 100% pick this book up and be like, "What the hell is this?" Because it's very it's a beautiful cover, honestly.
Yeah, she's one of my favorite artists in the world. She did Everything is Tulip. It was actually Eisner nominated.
Mm-hmm.
Fuck Off Squad is a great
Mm-hmm.
one. Her and her partner do a lot of books together. Yeah, I just kind of reached out to her on a whim, just kind of went with my first choice first, and she just happened to have availability and was interested. So yeah, super honored to have her cover here.
And you have a variant cover too, that Lane did, I believe, right? Too.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's
Yeah,
that's
that
more in
one's
the
real
style,
fun as well.
obviously. Yeah, it's more in the
Mhm.
style of what you see on the inside and the interior pages of the book, whereas
Yes.
Nicole's book cover is a little bit more different. Which again, I am a big fan of. There's like it's a conversation that I've had with multiple people about whether or not the cover should depict the art in the interior or should be different. And I
Mhm.
like how with this book, your cover A is the different one, and your cover B is the one that interprets the interior art on the cover, which is kind of cool. So you do get both, but it's cover A that's the one that's like more realistic than the interior, where most people do the opposite, which I like that. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. I mean, part of that's for marketing. Nicole's a lot more well known. Lane and I are, uh, newer in at this. So, if we can get some more eyeballs on the book, that's a huge win.
Before I get kind of like thrown off here a little bit too, but like not this is my fault, just or it's early not it's early in the morning for me here too in Maine, but it's just so people don't who are listening to this might not know, Mise En Place is a one shot from CEX, like we mentioned. It's solicitation on Previous World is after consuming every animal on Earth, humanity turns to the stars, enslaving, butchering, and consuming creatures from across the galaxy. But now the food is fighting back in spectacular, gory fashion. Tuck in your napkin for this messy, pulpy, over the top tale of bloody revenge. Dinner is served. And the big thing to me, too, when I read this description is that, again, like we mentioned at the top of this thing, is that you own a restaurant and that this is in the food service industry. I have spent, let's see now, 15 years in the food service industry. I was a bartender, bar manager. I now create labels we're a brewery restaurant, so I create labels for the restaurant or for the brewery, I should say.
Well, that's
So
great.
working in the food industry, whenever something contains something like that in the food service industry, it draws my attention because I'm like, oh, I know this. Like if I were to pick up a book about the forestry industry, I would
Yeah.
not know anything about it. But picking up something that you really have been involved in, and I think that some people don't. This can be said about every industry, but people don't understand sometimes what goes into working in the food industry if you haven't done it yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of those things where you ever go into a place and you have a big tipper. It's like, oh, they probably have worked in the food industry, whereas someone who hasn't doesn't know the whole service industry thing. But seeing that and having that as a background to this whole story made me really excited. Obviously, drawing from history, like we mentioned before, drawing from your past helps write this, right what you know. What else did you do any more research for, or is this just basically your life working in the food industry that was able to make this comic book come from?
Yeah, most of it's from my head. I did do a little research on I mean, I kind of wrote it with the idea of doing like a pulpy vegan
Mm-hmm.
propaganda thing. At my cafe, we served, meat, vegetarian, vegan options, so I wanted to make something that was kind of talked about overconsumption, but without being preachy. So tried to make it fun and pulpy, but still, can make you think a little bit. But so the one thing I did research was there's a interesting study about fish and how they can actually do feel pain. My dad took me fishing when I was a kid, like all the time, and it was like an old I don't know what you call it, but I was always told that fish don't feel pain,
Yeah.
but that's just some like passed around nonsense that's like not actually true. So there have been lots of like tests on that, and like they actually do feel pain. So just kind of use that as a little like intro to kind of like put the reader on the other side of the table, or make us feel what a turkey sandwich feels when it's being eaten. Yeah, turkey sandwich, an opportunity to have a little say in the matter.
Yes, exactly. And it's also like there's this the satire that or the comedy in this book that it's hyper real as well, to like in the point where you can relate it to real life, what's going on in the world, that we will destroy this planet and have to go find other places to get food or just living, and seeing
Yeah.
that and putting that as a base in a book. But honestly, this is fiction, but the idea that connecting it to the world we live in right now, and it's obviously way in the future or hyper fictionalized, but having that connection is great too, because it makes you feel like this could be real in a sense.
Yeah, and it just helps when you write about something you care about. And so that just gave me some a little jet fuel to kind of get the creative process going when you really are invested in something.
I love how you mentioned the veganism part of it. And in Maine, where I live, we have these vanity plates that you can, obviously any states can get, but for a little while they were doing like, you submit your plate online, someone in an office somewhere is like, yeah, that's appropriate, we can print that. So they print it and they send it to you, and so on. But then for a little bit, over like the beginning of, like, I don't know, 2019, it was just so many people applying for vanity plates. It just felt like too much of an overhead to just like to approve every single one. So the state of Maine just blanket approved everything. So you
Oh,
could
wow.
get a plate that said love on it, but you could also get one that said fuck on it. So it was like, it was a really weird thing. And I think they were going to go by the idea of, if someone complains enough about the plate, then they're going to write a letter to the person saying, hey, by the way, you have a certain date to go get your plate changed because it's inappropriate. Well, they rescinded that now. Now you're going back to the whole point where someone has to approve it. And there was this article in the paper the other day that said this person was fighting it because they got a letter in the mail saying they needed to change their plate. And it was the plate was love tofu. And I said, well, first of all, you really have to love tofu to get a plate that says love tofu on it. That's a lot. But it wasn't the fact that it was inappropriate because of love tofu. If you actually read it, it looks like it says love to FU.
Oh.
And I was looking at it, it's this picture of this nice family parked behind the car, and it says love tofu, and they're all excited, and they're like, we really love tofu and our vegan lifestyle and all this other stuff.
Yeah.
And I was thinking to myself, I'm like, yeah, but you got these two. I understand you love tofu, but it looks like it says love to FU. And I'm just saying, like, that's a tough. I don't know if I'd want that plate, even if I love tofu that much.
That's hilarious.
But yeah, so like it reminded me, I was reading this, and you talked about the vegans, and it reminded me this forever. I'm going to remember this love to FU license plate, and their love for tofu.
Yeah.
So when writing this comic book, does this give you, I mean, obviously you're a writer as well as you've written other things, you've written shorts, you have written some journalistic pieces as well. Is that true?
Yeah. I worked as a freelance journalist and for a couple magazines before doing food service.
Do you think that after writing this book and having this book come out, I mean, obviously it hasn't hit the shelves yet, but it's about to, that you're going to want to continue writing comic books?
Yeah, working on the next one right now. The cafe I ran, Little Red Fox, had a really like committed customer base. They all like really wanted a cookbook, so kind of using that opportunity to do a comic slash cookbook, kind of like a cookbook with comic strips in it. Attempting to write and draw it with my help from my wife. Gonna hopefully launch a Kickstarter for it actually in the next like week or two.
That's awesome. That's just thinking outside the box is, I think, what we need right now in the comic book industry. Not that saying things that people are doing right now are not good. I just think that sometimes there's just so much, like there's just so much out there right now, and content in general, whether it be TV or movies or comic books. Having this one things that stand out and are different, I think, are huge. And things like Kickstarter also helps this because it brings more attention and more marketing to a side and explaining what this is. Because I can read what your book, this one shot is in Previous World, but you get that one paragraph I read. Like that's all you get from the entire thing. But something like a Kickstarter or something like that gives you like a month long of people sharing it and having little videos and things and explaining a little bit more what's going on. Probably is the best avenue for something that's a comic book / cookbook, because trying to explain that to someone and show them what it would be a little harder just in this little paragraph inside of a big magazine that mostly people don't read.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean the thing I'm kind of working on is like I know how to sell it to comic book people. What I'm actually trying to do is figure out how to sell it to people who like don't know Kickstarter and don't know comics. So it's a little interesting dynamic to kind of, there's like older folks that like went to my cafe, so doing their age range from like teenagers through to like the 70-80 year olds that like want a recipe for our peanut butter bars.
Yes.
So trying to make it an all ages book that's you could read with your kids or be funny for an adult. So um it's an interesting situation, but it's made it fun. I love like creative problem solving. That's like my sweet spot and what I really enjoy.
Reading your this one shot with CEX, I didn't get hungry, but I feel like if I read a comic book that is also a cookbook, like I mainly read in bed, I feel like I'm just gonna get like reading it and be like, oh, peanut butter bars. That would be, honey, I'm hungry.
Oh, and we got the recipes in there, so hopefully that
Yes,
is.
it's like me at 2 o'clock in the morning cooking in my kitchen with this like propped up.
Yeah,
But
I as someone in the food service industry, I have a ton of cookbooks, but it's like, once I go through them once or twice, I don't like go back to them. So the
mhm.
idea is if there's like comic strips in there that like, you really like or funny, like maybe you'd go back to them both for the recipe and to like reread the stories. Um, so that's the goal.
That's awesome. Obviously that's in the future. You obviously have a book still coming out before then, and that is the you have to say it again. Say it again. How do you say
Mise
your
en
name?
place.
Mise en place. Okay, Mise.
Yeah, I mean it looks like mice in place or
Yeah,
my place,
Mise
but
in
yeah.
place. Yeah, and I think one time I wrote it Mise de place, and I don't know if that what that means,
I
but
do not speak French. I just know what
no,
I've been told.
yes, exactly right. So the book, I'm lost for words right now for the book. The book is I'm glad you sent it to me because last week when we were supposed to record originally, and we obviously got some timing mixed up here, but like I hadn't got a chance to look at it, so it obviously would have been a different conversation. I'm trying to think why I love the book so much,
Well,
but
that's
I do. It's one of
great.
those weird things. Have you ever like have you ever? You probably have finished something. I watched the movie Babylon recently,
Okay.
and I don't know if you've seen it or not, but it's
Aware of it. I haven't seen it.
okay. And at the end of the book, I was like, what the hell did, or at the end of the movie, I just went, what the hell did I just watch? But it was more in the way that I didn't know if it was what the hell did I just watch was a good thing or what the
Yeah.
hell did I just watch was a bad thing. And it's like
Yeah.
one of those things that like I like that sweet spot, whether you don't know if you love something or you hate something. And not the saying that I hated this book, because obviously I didn't, but there was just something that stood out about it. I don't know if it was the pulpy cartooniness of it or the story itself. The lettering is unbelievable too. I didn't even mention the lettering yet. The
Yeah.
lettering is
That's
fantastic.
John Reinhardt.
Yeah.
He actually is lettering at Comics Experience. So, and I've taken his class, and I could have attempted to letter it myself, but he really elevated every page. Um, and I know like Lane, the artist's style is like really expressive and like wacky and all over the place. I really wanted the Sean to like kind of just bring it, really ground it all and bring it all
Mhm.
together. Just did that so wonderfully. I'm so happy with his lettering.
And that's one thing that I mean, people a broken record. If people listen to the podcast, be talking about one thing that gets forgotten a lot is the lettering part. And I've spoken recently to two letterers on here to try to bring some attention to it because it does complete the book. I mean, your story is a framework,
Yeah.
and obviously your script is what people are reading. But then obviously the artwork people see, and then people kind of almost forget that the bubbles and the words are in something. Someone had to do that. It
Yeah.
didn't just appear. You didn't just use it. I mean, some point down the road, which is sad, AI is probably going to be able to do it for you, which is going to be ridiculous. But someone actually had to physically do that. So sometimes it takes away from a book, sometimes it adds to a book. And the perfect in between there is one that it's there because it's done well, but it doesn't draw away from what you're looking at. And I think that the sound effects and the speech bubbles and all those things were perfectly done in the book to complete the whole thing, as well as again, the story is just a little off the wall, and I don't want to give any of the story away because I want people to read it. But it's not your typical cooking comic book,
Yeah.
and I think it's complemented really well by the artwork and the lettering as well in the book as as a whole became a good
Yeah.
book.
I mean, bad lettering can really take you out of the reading experience because you're like,
Mhm.
oh, like, who's saying what, or like, did I misread the order here? Like, and you don't want to do that. You want to like stay in the flow and get lost in that. So, yeah, super happy with how Sean did that, and I crammed a lot into that book. So his expertise really helped keep it together, keep the flow.
And I have a PDF, obviously, of it, and it has this like yellow tint to it. Is that how it's gonna be printed too? To make it
Yes,
look
yeah,
like that's awesome. I love that special, the small little tweaks that you make to a book to make it special like that. It's awesome.
yeah. Like an old little
Mm-hmm.
pulpy, crazy, wacky book.
So I'm guessing you're pretty proud of this book.
Yeah, it's if I only ever make one comic, I wanted to put everything in there, and yeah, it's a little weird to ask all my friends and family to help like support it because like I don't know if I want like my grandma reading that,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's got a good message. It's fun. It's wild. So and I had such a great team helping me.
Mhm.
Paul Allor is just one of my favorite writers. Helped project manage and edit it. And then Lane's art's amazing. Sean did such an incredible job lettering. Uh, yeah, so I look forward to it. It'll be on New Comic Book Day or Free
April
Comic Book
20.
Day. I'm gonna do like a little signing at my local
Oh,
comic
nice.
shop in Long Beach, Pulp Fiction. So it'll be fun to kind of do some in person chatting about it with readers.
Yeah, because it comes out April 26th. It's a perfect timing for that too, because it'll be out right around a week or so before Free Comic
Yeah,
Book Day. It's awesome. That makes it perfect timing. It's always one of those things that I feel like you always sucks to be like, if this book were to come out like May 11th or something like that, where you're like, oh crap, it's like I could do a signing on Free Comic Book Day, but it comes out like 5 days later.
yeah,
And they have to wait an entire year to do something like that again. But no,
yes. Having a lot of people in the store will, it's hard to get people to pick up a book from a new writer, new artist. So the more bodies in there in that store that day, the better.
I'm guessing, and I'm trying to figure this out. So April 26th, you should be able to tell your comic book store right now that you want it because this
Yes,
episode
you
will come out this
still
week. So
still order it.
yeah,
It's available through two distributors, so they can still get it to you. And you can also
yep.
order direct through CEX Comics.
Mm-hmm. So it's definitely worth it, everybody. I mean, it's a simple one-shot comic book for $5. So like that's the other thing about these things is that like I've had conversations with a ton of people about miniseries versus ongoing, and how I've now been. At first, I had the tune of hating miniseries. I want something to continue going, but then I switched it to loving it because I can commit to 5 comic books. Like no one 4 or 5
Yeah,
comic books. Like that's not that much to commit to, and you get a story, you get a full intact thing. You really could commit to a one shot, people. Like that's the one thing. Like you pick up a book for $5, you read it, it's done. And if it does super well and CX sees this and it does extremely well, they're going to contact you and say, is there any more in this world that you can do, and move on from that. But like one comic book, people, as an opportunity for you to read one quick 22-page comic book and support, creators, independent creators is perfect in my opinion.
yeah, and it's fun to have like you get the whole story if you want it. You don't need to like get 5 other like related series to understand the context. I love superhero books, but sometimes that can be like overwhelming to catch up on everything. So I do appreciate, we can digest the whole story with a single purchase.
Mm-hmm. At this point, you mentioned that I the other day I think I opened up my Marvel Unlimited and I was like, oh, one of my favorite series of all time is the Secret Invasion and Civil War right around those same time. And I was like, oh, maybe I'll read every connecting thing. And I realized there's like 200 something of each series. Like there's 200
Yeah.
comic books that go together. And I'm like, I don't have time for that. So
Yeah.
one comic book is this perfect. It's a nice sweet spot. Or you could be like, as I said, Dr. Mark Guggenheim recently, and he had like 5 comic books out at the same time. And then like Cullen Bunn is coming on towards the end of the month, and he has like 5 comic books out at the same
Yeah.
time. And I'm just thinking to myself, I'm like, just to digest all those to have a conversation with someone is a lot. Let alone by the time we have a conversation, and make 2 or 3 issues of the same comic books, these comic books out. So I'm just like, first of all, how do you do it? Second
Yeah,
uh,
that is
uh,
prolific.
yeah. So a one shot's perfect for you.
Yeah.
What are you reading right now? Is there anything you're reading right now that people should? Are you just too busy with other stuff?
I don't know if you can see him on camera. I actually had a couple books behind me. I'm a huge Michael Sweater fan.
Okay.
Everything Sucks. It's on Silver Sprocket. I just read. Great cartooning, super hilarious. And Sarah So. I just read this one with my kid.
Oh, that's awesome.
It just has this incredible style to it. Just like super, super great all ages book.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Yeah.
you can probably see Headlopper up there. That's like
There you go.
maybe my all-time favorite comic
Oh,
of
really?
Andrew McLean.
Mm-hmm.
Just yeah, I don't know. People with like a really unique cartooning style is kind of what I've been drawn to lately. And just yeah, his book's like unlike anything.
That's awesome. I see you have some Legos there too, behind you.
Oh yeah, there's the Doctor Strange
Yeah, yeah.
building.
Mine's up there. I have one up there. You can't see it on the camera, but that's my Doctor Strange. I have a similar. It's not the exact same one, but it's a similar one. I have to keep it up really high because I let my son play around in here,
Oh
and
yeah,
he'll
yeah.
like there's
My son,
certain ones where I'm like, what do I? He wants to. He likes motorcycles, just like pictures of. He doesn't like obviously doesn't know much about him, but it's like bike, 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 and I have a little Walking Dead. Um, I think I have it here. Let me just grab it. For those who are listening, this is not very entertaining, but it's this like Walking Dead Daryl
oh nice.
motorcycle thing, and he always wants it. And I'm like, yeah, there's no way I'm hitting the 2 year old. Like, I don't care
Yes,
if he
my
breaks it.
eight,
That's not
so
like it
he's got
means
a
anything.
little more control, but you know he's allowed to rearrange the characters. But I
That's the
had
thing.
a
It's like I have these like little like they came in
oh,
like my wife got like 2 years ago got me like an advent calendar for Christmas, and they came with these like small like 3 inch or 2 inch pop characters, and he loves these, and they can go around these. And like, okay, this fits in his mouth. He's got a pretty good mouth right now. But yeah, he
yeah,
gets to
don't
play with those
follow
things.
those.
Anything that's small or valuable or I don't want him to get into is up extremely high on top of the shelf, and so. And also, I don't want him to fall, and I don't want to step on a Lego. I know how that feels. That's not fun. But your comic book, Mise En Place. I'm gonna say it wrong every single time. It's spelled MISE space EN space place. Is available through CEX. You can get that now. Tell your LCS to order it. If you don't have a local comic book shop, which is obviously sad to you, but if you don't, you can get it on CEX's website. You can also look for it on Previews World. They have covers and things like that on there as well. Matt, you are mattcarr.me.
That's
Is
my
your
website.
website?
Yes, exactly.
And I love that because ME is the abbreviation for Maine, so that's easy to remember. Uh, and you've got some things on there like Coffee Shark as well, and Out of Touch pieces on there as well, and a little bit more information about your one shot over at CEX. And you can follow your social on there as well. But if you don't want to go directly to that, people, you can go at Everybody Taste on Instagram and Twitter, right?
Yes, exactly. That's like a
Um,
blog I ran back in the day. Everybody
okay.
tasting music blog back when MP3s were still a thing.
What did I just see? I just saw someone with a mini disc player.
Oh
I
wow.
was like, oh, I remember those. That was like a hot second. They had mini disc players, but
Yeah,
yeah.
I never did it to that one.
And then on the Last of Us TV show, Ellie, she had a Walkman,
Walk. Oh
and
yeah,
yeah, yeah,
that's a
and I
classic.
wrote
That I can get behind.
classic. Yes, but it was just funny too. I always try to think of my wife and I try to like put together the words of like what something that's taken over the entire, like Googling something is searching something, and Kleenex is in Xeroxing, and it's like Walkman was that. And some people
Yeah,
don't understand that that was actually the name of Sony's tape player. It was
yeah,
not just that a portable tape player has now become called a Walkman, no matter what
yeah,
whoever made it. But that's kind of funny seeing her on that show with a Walkman. I'm like, oh my god, I'm gonna be
yeah.
37 in May, and I'm not that old, but I feel old like seeing that. But yeah, so CEX has your comic book coming out. Check that out, April 26th. If you don't get a chance to tell your LCS, I'm sure they'll have copies of it on the shelf. But if not, again, CEX website has it, and there's 2 covers for it. So be a doll and get both of them, right, Matt?
Woo! Yes, please.
It's completionist. It's a one shot and there's 2 covers. There you go. Get 2 issues, not too much. One for displaying or bagging and boarding, and one for reading. And there you can, keep it. This actually would be kind of a cool as like a miniseries TV show too. After I read it, it was kind of cool, animated show because you use the same animation style and did it in the Cartoon Network thing. So I'm pitching that out there for you too, so that you can get picked up.
I love that.
You're like, I'm not going to complain about that at all. Sounds good to me.
Yeah.
But yeah, so check that out, and then I said follow Matt on Instagram and see his stuff, and look for that Kickstarter coming out at some point. We'll look for that as well, and we can, if you let me know about it, we can feature it on the site too.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it.
Share that out there into the ether of the internet. But thank you so much for waking up early and being with me. I'm going to a comic book show in New Hampshire, which is about a 4-hour drive from me, in April. It's called the Old School Comic Show, and it's literally just creators, which is really cool to me and my buddy.
Awesome.
Like, it's just comic book creators and vendors. There's no like celebrity guests or anything like that. They're the celebrities that we like. The Jim Starlin is the celebrity guest for this thing. So like that to me is a celebrity. And I texted him and I was like, hey man, do you want to like leave at 8 in the morning and get there an hour after it starts? Or do you want to like get up and leave at 6 so we can get there when it starts? And he's like, I guess I can get up once a year. And I'm laughing. I'm like, I got up at 5:30 this morning because my son. So I don't know what you're talking about. All of his kids are like 8, 9, 10 years old now. So I'm like, mine's 2. He gets up early. So early to me is nothing. So we're looking forward to that. But yeah, I was laughing when you said you would wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning. I was like, I kind of feel for you, but I'm kind of like, I'm up anyway.
It's my wife who I had to kick out of the bedroom so we could do this. So
So okay, sorry to your wife. That's I but she'd be happier. She's happy if you sell a bunch of comic books. So if we can get one person to buy a comic book because of this, then there you go, right? It's all worth it. So thank you, Matt, so much for coming on. Again, everybody, mattcarr.me, or follow Everybody Taste on Instagram and Twitter for more information about that, and pick up Mise En Place on CEX and tell your LCS you'll want a copy of it because it's great. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.